All right, I think we'll start now. We'll let others join as they come. But first of all, would like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Management Committee of Canada Chapter of Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. I'm Isghana Ansari, and I have the entire Management Committee here with us. First of all, thank you, Stephen, for joining us today. A short introduction to Stephen before we move into the actual topic for today. So Stephen is the National Service Line Leader for KPMG in Canada's Deal Advisory Analytics practice. He and his team work wonders with data analytics, and I've witnessed that firsthand. He supports pension plan, private equity, and corporate investors directly and through KPMG's other deal advisory service lines, enabling them to make better decisions by leveraging data and analytics. Stephen links data science, advanced analytics, and compelling visualizations with business strategy and investment drivers to improve ROI for clients. His focus areas include software, business services, manufacturing, healthcare, and other technology-enabled industries. And prior to joining KPMG, Stephen worked for a boutique professional services firm supporting investors in the technology space. His experience also includes commercial due diligence and go-to-market strategy work for investors focused on technology and digital businesses. And today he is with us to talk about the use of generative AI, in normal terms, Chat GPT, that we call it, in the accounting world. So for now, Stephen, I'd like to hand it off to you and you can take it forward.
Great. Thank you very much, and everybody hear me okay? What a fascinating topic we have today. I'm sure everybody has seen and watched the meteoric rise of Chat GPT and other generative AI technologies over the last 5 months. And, for those that have been in the industry significantly longer than that as well, you can read the research reports and analysis that come out almost daily in terms of the impact that generative AI will have on our day-to-day work. There was a recent one from, I believe it was the Harvard Business School in joint collaboration with BCG that looked at the impact of generative AI on, kind of knowledge, right? Which is, in a sense, what we do on a daily basis as accountants and others in the field. And the data suggested, up here as well, that in terms of, hopefully you can hear me a little bit better now, in terms of generating ideas, generative AI generated, a 1.75 increase compared to others in terms of just a regular knowledge worker. And in terms of uplifting the top professionals, I believe it was around, I think it was about a 20% increase to top professionals. One of the biggest increases was the lower skilled performers, I believe, saw a substantial increase in performance at 43%. Compared to what the others experience. So you can just see by looking at some of this data, and you can find this report online, how significant that generative AI technologies will impact, again, our day-to-day work. So with that, is it possible for you to enable screen sharing? Just so I can share my screen.
You can do that, Stephen. Go ahead.
Okay. It does say that it has disabled screen sharing. All right, perfect. There we go. Great. Hopefully everybody can see that and still see me.
Yep, we can see it, Stephen.
Great. Excellent. So with that, there's a few things that we want to kind of cover today, and want to try and keep this as much as a discussion as we can. So I'll do my best to think, answer questions, but if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. And I will do my best as well to try and keep this interactive, because I know listening to a webinar for 45 minutes can sometimes be a challenge, especially at the end or at the beginning of the day. So I'd love to just actually start with a bit of an informal poll here, and maybe you can just drop a comment in the chat. So where are you? And you could think about this from a number of different ways. So perhaps the organization you work for, where would you say they are along this maturity curve? Or in school, where might you be, kind of using it on a day-to-day basis? So on the left-hand side, not really using it. You're kind of traditionally relying on kind of human methods and expertise in decision making, all the way to the right-hand side, right? Which is kind of, full transformation, where you really fully embrace generative AI. They're really using that to transform the business. So let me just kind of, again, pause, maybe give folks a moment to put something in the chat. We'll just call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 being low adoption and kind of 5 being full scale adoption. So again, think about this in your day-to-day or in the organizations you work for. Just looking at the chat, I'm seeing a lot of ones. Seeing a lot of ones. And I'm not surprised. So earlier this year at KPMG, we hosted a generative AI kind of forum for a number of people within the finance industry, particularly private equity. But again, obviously people that are using, software and accounting systems every day. And most of those people and the private equity fund they work with, as well as their portfolio companies, tended to sit more, again, in that 1 to 2 category. So low adoption or the kind of exploratory phase. There's actually only one organization that ended up in the kind of advanced integration, full-scale transformation. And the guidance from the data and analytics kind of leader in that organization was, if my team is not using generative AI every day to do their work, then they're probably not working as efficiently as they can. And so I think that really just highlights that once you can get your head around the risks and the privacy concerns and, put the right standards and safeguards in place, you can really, drive this forward, and it can be a business enabler. I, of course, was too lazy to make this survey set of questions myself. So I simply asked Chat GPT to describe a spectrum of generative AI adoption. It gave me an answer. I asked it to rewrite the answer shorter, and then I actually asked it to rewrite it again, even shorter, so I could fit it on the slide. And then the background hero image, I used another generative AI technology to do this. So, I work for an accounting organization. Sure, this wasn't necessarily accounting, but it's something that I did to help make my job more efficient. So with that, let's continue. I'll probably touch briefly just on the background of generative AI, again, assuming most people are pretty well aware of it. And then I want to spend a lot of time just on like the actual practical use cases, because I think that's going to be the most important thing coming out of this that, we can kind of teach you, or you guys can learn, is, again, what are the real practical applications of this? So we know that generative AI really refers to kind of an artificial intelligence technology that generates novel content. This is it's a process that occurs basically using math and probability in the case of a large language model. If you start typing once upon a, generally 98% of the time, it's going to say time. And so when you ask a question, and in this case, OpenAI is writing you back an answer, it is conducting that mathematical thinking every time to really kind of understand what probability-wise might come up next. Which is why, if you were to ask that question fundamentally 100 times, you might get a handful of answers that don't say once upon a time. It might say once upon a, I don't know, the nursery rhyme, but I'm sure there's something that follows this. And I've kind of touched on this, and that's probably why we're all here. I mean, generative AI is really touching across, all aspects of our organization. So we're going to really see an important need to upskill our workforce. If you're really in the tech field, you can see jobs posted around being a prompt engineer, right? So how do you intelligently ask a question to a generative AI interface to achieve a certain answer? Organization. So again, one of the things that I work in and is alluded to is in the private equity space and a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And so there's an emerging concept of basically generative AI diligence, right? How do you potentially quantify or qualify the risk to a business when you're conducting financial diligence, which of course we all do as accountants? How do you perhaps start layering in the angle related to the impact of generative AI? So if you are planning to buy maybe an animation studio that currently has 200 animation software developers, right, basically making Mickey Mouse on screen every day, generative AI technology can largely do that for you, right? And so is that a positive benefit to look at? Again, not necessarily from an accounting perspective, but more of a commercial diligence, or is it going to have a negative impact and your moat, which might be, the really smart people you have at your organization might obviously go away. Technology, this again has been quite an imperative over the last several months when you read the news headlines and you see the doom and gloom from someone like a Jeffrey Hinton, who, kind of says, look, the world is going not in a good place, and, generative AI is one of the things that kind of happening. So using this technology responsibly, obviously securely and fairly is very important. I believe one of the U.S. courts just announced a couple days ago that generative AI content generated, I think it was content and pictures generated from generative AI is not copyrighted, right? And so you're seeing, again, a lot of rules and regulations starting to form around this topic. And then obviously, kind of social as well, continues to be some changes there. So I'll just jump right into the kind of how to get started. And again, these might be things that you guys are already using today in your day-to-day. So I might take a pause at the end of each one of these kind of key areas and maybe, ask someone from the audience if they have an anecdote or something that they want to share in terms of how to actually use it. So when we kind of think about it from an accountant's perspective, there's really kind of 5 broad areas where we see and where we're currently using it as an advantage. So research. So conduct market research, understand and analyze industry, best practices and, any specific trends. Can use to help ideate, right? Which if you remember the Harvard Business School study I referenced just at the beginning of this, ideation was something that generative AI technology performed better than, entry level, mid-level BCG consultant. In this case, we could explain. So, we're also doing this, and so you kind of explain those topics and aid in the development. The next one is kind of summarize. So can you hear me better now?
It's a bit better. Can you say something again? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you say something?
And the last one, or the second last one, is summarize.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me just try changing my audio setting. It sounds like I'm having some issues here.
Yeah, because it keeps on trading away after a bit. So I think the mic is, the headset mic would work better.
Okay. I don't have a AirPods. One more time. If not, I'm just going to talk very loudly into my computer. Let's start connecting this. All right. Is this better? Great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Much better now. Apologies, everybody. So the second last big area where we see, great opportunity to use generative AI technology is around summarizing. So we are often faced with, again, large amounts of information every day. How do we streamline that? Pull out the salient points in order to know, what to analyze and what to move forward on. And then lastly, as well as coding. And this is something that you can use to kind of write or debug code, Excel, again, as we're all using in our daily life as accountants. I'm one that when I open an Excel and I start trying to solve a problem, if it takes me, more than 3 manual steps, I generally ask myself, I'm probably doing something wrong. And in that case, I normally go and I ask Chat GPT, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Can you give me an Excel formula to do it? And so, again, just another great example. And I think the other thing, just to know, and I'm sure people are aware of this, that, the currently available version of Chat GPT that's kind of online, unless you have the paid version, is 3 or 3.5, which obviously has some information limitations to, I believe, November 2021. GPT-4 is much more current. So do be aware that what you are interacting with is trained on the internet, and we know that the internet does have its inherent biases, and it's always important to review and QA your information. So conduct market research. So here you are. You might be your first day on the job, or your 100th day on the job, but you're coming across an accounting scenario where you've been asked to support a client in the real estate market, and you really need to have a better understanding of what are the global leading practices to reduce accounting times, because you're being a bit of an advisor here, from an accounting perspective. And so you ask the kind of question, hey, can you please guide me on what solutions real estate agencies typically use to reduce accounting time apart from financial systems? Again, in this case, limit the response to 2 proven solutions, and of course, please provide a link. So here, ChatGPT goes. Explains, there's an opportunity around centralized data repositories and database systems. And then there's also an approach related to the continuous close method as well. So here you are, you might have never have experienced something in the accounting industry before, but just like you might in Google ask, hey, what are best practices? What are the key trends to know in a given industry? You can replicate that kind of use case here within ChatGPT in this case, or any other generative AI technology that would be tailored for that specific model. So maybe I'll pause there, and if there's any brave folks that want to maybe unmute themselves and give an example of how they might have conducted market research in their day-to-day work in the past. Silent is also open. I know this is tough on a Zoom call.
Hey, this is Junaid here. Junaid.
Hey.
So I've recently used ChatGPT for. I'm working in the insurance industry for.
Great.
We are undergoing the process of working papers. So in order to substantiate our position on the royalty payment that we are doing it to our head office, how to treat them under the insurance service expense. So I use a ChatGPT to draft me a white paper for me that helped me to provide evidence that substantiate my position to auditors.
Great. Yeah, great use case. Anybody else? Any other folks that might want to give an example around using generative AI for conducting market research?
Stephen, I have just a quick question. Basically,
Sure.
and I believe that just to make things more simpler, I believe then the response of this market research can also be asked to be in the different forms, for example, table, bullets, right, or a presentation, right? So we can direct that in our question.
Sorry, can generative AI look at those?
So I'm saying that basically when we are asking, right, we're putting a format, right? So basically we can also say that, for example, in what format we respond, we need the response of the market research. For example,
in some cases, depending on which generative AI technology, you can do that. And I think we always think about Chat GPT as like the be all end all. But if you just honestly, funny enough, Google search, different generative AI technologies. There's another one, I think it's PDF GPT or something like that, where you upload a PDF and you can now parse a PDF and start asking questions in the PDF. Totally free. Obviously, it uses, I think, Chat GPT in the back end, but the more you start exploring and you start thinking about your use cases, there's a number of technologies.
sorry, your voice dropped.
You can upload a table and say, hey, please add a column to this table, specifying, what color was in the description or something like that. And I know I've seen a number of interesting, kind of plugins for Google Sheets, for example, where ChatGPT is kind of integrated into Google Sheets, and you can kind of use it for a number of different use cases as well. The other one is kind of ideation. So again, putting on your accounting hat, in this case, you are a controller at a construction company, you're working on ways, or you're kind of working on exploring ways to suggest to HR on how to train your accounting team on the new IFRS developments in an innovative way, right? Fascinating question. We're all interested in the latest IFRS requirements. And so, you go ahead and you suggest that prompt, and it comes up with, two very interesting examples. So one is more of a project-based learning using digital twins, which in itself is a pretty fascinating concept. And the other one that I never would have thought of was, kind of AR enhanced site visits. And so, here you're kind of marrying the tangible, which is the construction site, with the intangible of the financial data. So if I just kind of think about that, for example, you might have kind of a VR headset or something on, and you're walking around a virtual construction site, and again, perhaps you're seeing prices or cost of goods of different things, and you can kind of interact with it visually. But again, something that I never would have thought of, frankly, either of these two. What would I have thought of to do a training process? I would have thought, oh, let's have a webinar. Let's get everybody together in a room, give them pizza and pop, and read from the book, right? Like I never would have thought something about using digital twins or kind of an AR and site visit. So there's again another great example where this is doing something that I just never would have thought of. And that is obviously very much the kind of power of these technologies. So anybody, again, who feels comfortable unmuting themselves that would like to provide an example of how they've used generative AI for ideation, again, in their day-to-day work.
I think I can share a use case here, for example, for when I was working on a project and it was a new industry for me, and I just wanted to understand how to look at or kind of like analyze revenue for that particular industry, and I wanted ideas around it. And I just used prompts on ChatGPT to help me do that.
Great, thank you, Sharon. So the third one, and this is something that again I use daily in my work, is helping using these technologies to really kind of help explain topics. So in this case, I just received a sales report from a client in the food and beverage industry, and I have a meeting with my boss in an hour to describe the trends in the report. So what do I do? I actually, to your point, kind of Reza, I copy that Excel data into Chat GPT, and I ask, hey, can you please analyze the above sales data, summarizing major locations of sales and products sold in the last 12 months. Obviously, there's always a bit of a caveat here. The Excel does need to be formatted in a way to drive good insights itself. But in doing so, it actually outputs a number of interesting points and summarized with the conclusion. One of the great things about ChatGPT is you can actually re-ask it questions, and once the question has already been asked. So in this case, I could, as I look at the conclusion, right, New York has larger, total sale of, almond bars, etc. If I felt I needed to have a follow-up question, or if I said, hey, can you please give me an example about crackers? Which location has sold the most crackers? It recognizes the data you uploaded, the question and the answer it just gave you, and then it kind of factors in that most recent kind of re-prompt, right? Or that re-ask, which again itself is quite a fascinating approach and really allows you to kind of continuously kind of query this information. So anybody use ChatGPT or another generative AI technology, to kind of explain maybe a complex topic in their day-to-day that they would like to share?
I have used it in writing, for example. There are sometimes we came across a lot of, agreements which have a non-withstanding clause, which is, usually very difficult to understand and interpret. So let's say I have used it in Chat GPT. If you write that, we copy the text and say that, can you convert it to a simple plain language so that we can understand? And it's really very helpful that basically it can really rewrite the entire text in a very simpler way to understand for everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. The fourth one is really summarizing information. And again, I think of the classic TLDR, which is a great example here, where here, we're an internal audit member of the bank. I have a draft email ready to go out to the chief internal auditor. And, I needed to write a very kind of concise response. And so I think we're often doing this with emails, but it's also great with some of the text that we have as well. So I paste that in. I get a response. If I felt like I wanted to write this in Shakespearean language, I could then again do a reprompt to say, please rewrite this in Shakespearean language. Or if I wanted to write something, again, depending on who you're interacting with, maybe in a more blue collar setting, can you write this with maybe a more blue collar feel to it? Could you write this more with a feeling that you're an executive at the company? And again, the power of generative AI will kind of tailor its responses to you to kind of meet those requirements. So anybody, and I'm sure there's a lot that have been using this. Give an example of kind of using generative AI technology to summarize information. And it's okay if no one has done this use case. If you have not done this use case, please report back at some point after this call telling me how much it saved you in reading, certain documents. So this is a great one. This last one, and sometimes I just have fun with this when I get bored, between different calls. And that's really, using generative AI to assist with kind of formulas or code. And I give that example in jest because when I was doing a similar document like this for some internal people at KPMG a few months ago, I think my question or my prompt was, can you please analyze this worksheet and remove like all the vowels from every word? And, I don't know why that use case came to mind, not that we have to face that use case, but I did paste that in and it gave me this very interesting formula that I never used before, but I subsequently did and removed all the vowels from my worksheet. So it's quite good. But this is just a great example where, you might be busy, and this is one of those classic things that I don't know if other people have faced this, but sometimes I face this. It's math you probably learned in grade 8 or grade 9, and you're like, it is just on the tip of your brain, and you can just simply ask it, hey, what's the formula for CAG, percentage increase, decrease? What are the right set of parameters to use in Excel to calculate a certain field? So in this case, can you calculate the average sales for a product, within a specific date range? Again, pretty simple, but again, it kind of gives you that example. And again, just with the power of free prompts, it's very easy to ask it another question to say, hey, can you please, using sample data, write the actual points for me? And then it'll give you a little table and it'll say, okay, A, B, A1, A2, here's the rows, here's the structure, here's what it looks like. And again, you can also ask it to explain what a given function might be. So anybody here using generative AI technologies to assist in kind of coding or Excel work? If not, no worries. Good. So, again, this is a very important, component. I've kind of alluded to it a number of times, is using prompts. And so ask Chat GPT, what is a prompt? Again, and I say there's, really kind of, a handful of really important components. So you have to be very clear and specific. Given the breadth of information that Chat GPT in this case was trained on, it can provide you a very nuanced set of information. And so it's very important to be very specific, provide the details if you want, date ranges or specific countries or, sub industries. Provide that level of detail because it does often have that information. It's important to just ask I'd say a pretty broad question right at the same time. And so ask open-ended questions, not something that is simply going to entail receiving a yes or no. Refine your questions. I've highlighted this a number of times, which again is, using that kind of prompt and then kind of checking in and going deeper. And then again, in some cases, providing examples, whether it's sample data or uploading other information, is really going to help, in this case, Chat GPT, kind of process the information more effectively. So any kind of questions there before we kind of shift a little bit to I'd say some market insights and just kind of see and hear what some of, your other peers and other industries and other kind of business areas are using?
Stephen, are there any specific AI tools which are in place, which are being used in the accounting world?
So it's a great question, because I think as I don't know.
Just to get an example right now, because we have some tools for job search, for example, Sonera, Career Flow, because these tools are already in place and they are AI tools. So just like that.
For sure. Well, that's where I was kind of going with that, is I think we've over-rotated all around ChatGPT, but the reality is AI has been embedded in technologies for 10, 15 plus years. And so I know KPMG, we have a solution to help in audits and accounting called MindBridge, right? Uses AI, right? You can look at even something basic like a Power BI, which has a fuzzy matching technology as a part of it. Okay, not necessarily, kind of maybe classic AI or generative AI, but it is using the power of kind of data science, algorithms, and, kind of routine testing to understand if, say 2 different entities are actually the same, right? And so, again, I think we've over-rotated on AI is brand new, and this is something, but it's really the generative AI part. So I think MindBridge, just where KPMG is one, but I know there's a long list of kind of, software to help, accounting and finance professionals, which does have embedded AI technologies. So if we look at just again some market insights, and I highlighted this a little bit at the beginning. So we brought together earlier this year kind of 15 kind of private equity pension plan clients. I'd say kind of really 3 kind of key things that came out of it. One, again, most, especially at the smaller end, we're pretty nascent in terms of using generative AI technologies. The use cases, and I kind of emphasize these a couple of times. So, kind of content summary and content generation, as well as coding, were some of the top use cases. And, always overarching in everybody's back, the back of everybody's mind was, the impact to IT, security, and proper governance, and then of course change management. I think change management is often one of those overlooked aspects here, where this has to be, I think, driven and supported very much kind of top down across the organization with the right guardrails in place to ensure that, again, it is done properly and securely here as well. So this is actually a KPMG study that I think came out maybe two months ago or so ago. So in this case, 55% say the tools kind of give them, an additional, or save them an additional 1 to 5 hours per week. 67% allow them to take on additional work, right? So especially as knowledge workers here, maybe it allows you to take on another, another accounting file. If you can rapidly review an MDA management discussion analysis section, right, that might, again, free up, another 4 or 5, 6 hours a week to allow you to focus on other things, right? And again, those are great use cases for generative AI technology. Interesting enough, 16% of people, don't think their bosses kind of know that they're using generative AI technology, but you can see that most people on the left-hand side pie chart are using this, half, kind of half a week, kind of daily, a few times a week. And so, again, it is something that I use, and I know many of my colleagues are using kind of daily for a number of the use cases that I outlined earlier. Data risk poses. If I think of the evolution of generative AI or just the buzz around it over the last 6 months, when this really kind of came out, with a lot of publicity, if I think of kind of that April, May, June, I think it just kind of shot up right away. Over the summer, I feel like a lot of enterprises, once they started getting their head around the power it had, and I think we saw a lot of news articles, and this is when Jeffrey Hinton came out and said, generative AI is going to take over the world kind of thing. People started realizing, hey, we have to be concerned about privacy. We have to be concerned about security. We have to have the right, governance in place. And, now we're seeing in many cases, regulations, from a federal or kind of national perspective starting to come to place to think about how do we govern AI and some of the technology. But here's just an example of people, and most of this is probably innocent. Being innocent is putting information into generative AI technologies. The company, private information, again, what you put in goes out publicly. And I think that's something that, unless you have a private instance, again, it's very important to be aware of. Again, a lot of organizations are trying to figure out the right way to do this. Most are saying that there are pretty vague policies, right? You can use it for this, you can't use it for this, you can't use it for client information, but you can use it for business development. You can't use it to generate an output, without it being reviewed, and many other kind of as well. And so I think, again, just as a starting place is to think about what are the policies you have in the workforce today, and again, obviously clarify any questions you might have around it from a day-to-day use perspective. I'll just kind of wrap with a few more slides here, and then so we can pause and do our best to answer questions that we can. So in terms of barriers, really skilled talent. If you're a small or mid-sized organization and you might be the controller or the CFO or somebody working in finance, you might have a very small IT department, right? And it's a burden on that IT department to figure out the policies, the ways of working, putting the right security and safeguards in place to enable the kind of staff to work efficiently as well. Cost, lack of investment. Again, especially if you're putting in a private instance, this does cost money, and there is that budget to consider. I'd say, again, just even the ways to implement the upper right. This is a conversation I have with clients frequently is, we recognize the power of it. We just don't know how to get started, right? And, I wish I had a magic, 6-week program that, technology stack and everything embedded where, you could just kind of go and turn it on and you'd have access. But there is really, so many considerations to think about. What are your use cases? What's the right large language model to be using? Do you have the right, IT policies in place? Is everybody trained accordingly? So, there are a number of barriers, and I think these are becoming clearer as we see more use cases being put forward generated by the technology. So again, kind of security. I know we see again here around kind of contracting, intellectual property, who owns these rights. Again, the example I gave earlier, I think again, the news at the U.S. was from the U.S. Patent Office was that generated content or images or pictures, couldn't be copyrighted here as well. Again, we know depending on the version, there are some limitations around outcomes, and I think the thing here as well is, because it's in a sense a probabilistic model, yes, it might have a 98% chance that when you write once upon it's going to take time, but there is that, kind of 2 or 1% that it doesn't, right? And if you are not aware enough, and if you're not QAing the work, and if you're not applying maybe a degree of common sense to reviewing the answer you get from a generative AI technology, obviously there's, kind of a risk there as well, based off of the actual output that you're getting. So with that is the wrap. And so really appreciate everybody's kind of time. Would love to just open for a little bit of a dialogue here to the best we can in terms of questions, comments, how might you be using this, any other kind of directions that might be needed.
For sure, Stephen. Thank you so much for the discussion. I do think we have a few questions in the chat. I'll just start by addressing one of them. Very interesting question. It's what are your thoughts around clients or supervisors knowing that you use Chat GPT? Would they see it as something negative, like translating it as lacking imagination, skills, or laziness?
I would say no, because I think enterprises, and I think of our organization, KPMG, our enterprise has recognized the power that generative AI technologies have to make us work more efficiently and be more productive, right? And if that means I can generate a list of 5 cost savings ideas for my client in a push of a button, and I can review them with maybe a subject matter expert, and I can do that all within an hour instead of 5 hours, that is a huge time saving. And I think this goes back to having the right governance, kind of C-level support, who recognize the importance and power of these technologies to kind of, again, improve our day-to-day. So if you're, the other angle I would say is if you just simply don't know what you're doing and you're trying to, moonlight away by using Chat GPT to answer all of your questions, then you do probably have an issue, and you should think about, relearning some content. But again, if you know the idea and you want to kind of drive this forward, I think it's a very powerful.
All right, great. All right, our next question is around, is there a chance that generative AI can be trained or misfed by wrong information or facts?
Absolutely. I mean, generative AI is trained on the internet, and we all know there's a lot of information that's on the internet that is not always maybe accurate or perhaps aligned with someone's values and principles. And so that is, in a sense, what the training data is on. And so in this case, in ChatGPT, absolutely. When you start thinking about other large language models or developing your own private instance, right, this is where you do have more control on the training data. So, for example, an organization might take their intranet and they might upload all of their IT policies, right? All these things we never read when we kind of check the box to become an employee into a Chat GPT-like interface. Well, you know the data that's there. You know it's not going to be commingled with, other data, and now you can kind of interrogate that like you would from a generative AI, from a Chat GPT interface perspective. And in that case, you know that the data is likely in a sense, really what the training set of data is as you kind of engage with these technologies.
Sorry, yeah, that makes sense. And I understand, like, as of now, it's not updating anything after 2021, correct? So whatever people are feeding Chat GPT now would not impact what it's giving results for, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So moving to our next question, Anam is asking, what is a good starting point or learning tool to use Chat GPT more effectively and frequently?
Chat GPT itself. It does sound odd, but put in the prompt, can you please, give me guidance on how I can use generative AI more effectively? I realize that's a funny answer, but I ask away, and I know there's again a myriad of blogs and I think LinkedIn posts as well about prompt engineering and how to maximize these things. But I think think about the use cases we walked through today and use that as a starting point.
Great, that perfectly makes sense. Going forward, Faizan has asked, what is the difference between Chat GPT introduced by audit firms versus Chat GPT available to public at large?
Well, I mean, Chat GPT is a publicly available software, and if you're an audit for a firm, someone in the Big Four, you might have a private instance of it, which would mean that if I ask it a question, for example, in the KPMG environment, if we had a private instance, that I know whatever I ask it isn't going to go outside the four walls of the KPMG environment. In that case, it would be very similar if you're a Deloitte or PwC or anybody else.
Got it. I hope, Faizan, that answers your question. There's another question. In your near future, is Chat GPT replacing auditors?
Absolutely not. I think any artificial intelligence technology is going to be really oriented around making our lives as knowledge workers more efficient, right? And I think organizations who are progressive are really kind of pushing forward about how that actually, is delivered on a day-to-day basis. So I don't. But if you're worried, I mean, become a plumber and an electrician. Just saying.
All right. Our next question is around. There are two questions that are similar, and they're basically asking, is there a way to double check the generative AI answers using another AI tool?
Well, again, one of the challenges with that kind of checking, double checking, is a lot of the generative AI technologies are all based on the same training data, which is the World Wide Web. And so that can be, I think, a bit of a challenge. I think one of the important things to do is ask for links, right? And then it's on you as a user of these technologies to go back and verify the information in the link itself. But again, because it's a probabilistic model, there's always a chance that the information it puts forward is not correct, and I'm sure many of us have experienced this, is slightly different. If you ask it, give me 5 cost saving ideas for a hotel today, and then you ask that same question tomorrow, it might give you 4 out of the same, right? Or it might give you 5 out of it, but the answer is slightly kind of tweaked and different.
Great. I think we have a question around a plugin. So there's a question around if there's a particular plugin that can assist in accounting from a practical standpoint for Chat GPT, and briefly introduce how it works. Is there a separate plugin for Chat GPT, or is just that?
Not that I'm aware of. But I mean, I know many financial systems are starting to use in generative AI technologies, and I know that the market continues to innovate. So I wouldn't be surprised if give it a month, 2 months, 3 months, or just, probably some searching, and you might find some specific plugins, for accounting. I mean, I just Google search here, and you can see 13 best Chat GPT plugins for finance, 8 ways to use Chat GPT in accounting, 4 best Chat GPT plugins for accounting. So these exist, and again, not necessarily trusting them blindly, but something to consider.
Perfect. And I think we have a question around, based on provided data, can someone trust blindly on Chat GPT outcome or results? I think Stephen briefly touched on it earlier, but I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to use some common sense, some intuition, and double check and verify the information. So short answer is no. You cannot trust it blind.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions that were in the chat box. Unless someone wants to unmute themselves and want to ask a question or leave a comment or any use case around ChatGPT or any concern around ChatGPT that they want to address.
Hi, this is Mustafa. I have one question. I'm a beginner to all this, sitting at the treasurer level in an organization, not so much involved with day-to-day or analysis and all that. So my question is, how do I use it? What are some of the sources? How could it be beneficial to, say, a C-suite person?
You probably, I mean, as a C-suite, you probably spend, 30, 40% of your time writing emails every day, maybe thinking about strategies and approaches to solving problems. That's how those 2 use cases, I would say, might be 2 good applications for you. Please write an email to all staff outlining this change in accounting policy. Please write this email out to all the staff outlining the new change to our expense policy when it comes to meal reimbursement, right? Your 1 sentence prompt might save you, again, kind of 10, 15 minutes of writing an email and reviewing it. And again, I think, similarly on the idea generation side, thinking about it, what are maybe the cost levers that you can start pulling, or even the revenue levers that you can, start driving towards for, kind of a given industry and organization.
Makes sense. Thank you. This is very helpful.
All right. Is there anyone else who would want to unmute themselves and just ask a question? We have 5 more minutes here that we can.
Do we have any regulatory or statutory requirements coming in terms of this Chat GPT for IFRS? Something like that in near future.
I'm not aware, but I wouldn't be surprised, because pretty much every regulatory body is looking at and considering what needs to be put in place for different types of technologies.
Anyone else who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question? Just earlier, I was watching a video in which there was just a group of teachers who were discussing about, how ChatGPT has changed their approach and how, they've started implementing techniques to, check for plagiarism or check whether students have used ChatGPT. And then one of the teachers was like, this is exactly what happened like in previous times when calculators were introduced. We tried to police the use of calculators, which wasn't the right idea. And now we think about it and we're like, we had to evolve with it. And similar, I think, was the case with ChatGPT. One of the teachers mentioned that now they basically have to change their approach towards teaching. They have to basically ask their students to do their homework using ChatGPT, but then come the next day and critique it together, or talk about what ChatGPT has generated. And this is the approach that they have to start using. They have to basically change their approach. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen with every profession.
Absolutely. Great. Well,
Great.
appreciate the time here, everybody, and I wish everybody a wonderful evening or morning or,
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. Everyone's leaving lovely comments in the chat. And great to hear from you. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And have a lovely evening.
Great. Thanks, everybody.